vibe. That's how we think of you. So you might as well wear shades. All right. Well, welcome to Monday, December 18th, Solid Ground live stream. And we are here, Jennifer Friend, Deborah Knox, and myself. And we are, we're thinking about what's going on in the culture right now. Are we noticing a little bit of a shift of things? Well, one of the things we were talking about this morning, just before we started this live stream, is people are starting to observe changes in the wokeness, how people are accepting it. There's a bit of a rejection of it in some areas. And is it enough? What's going on? And maybe we can explore that a little bit. Deborah, you had some interesting insights. But first, do one of you want to give us the blurb? Tell people who Solid Ground is and what we do?
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay. I'm actually looking on our website so that I don't have to think. God forbid I think. Solid Ground is a peer support community dedicated to helping people to navigate the divisive impacts of oppressive ideologies. You can find us at solidgroundsupport.com. We offer 3 peer support groups per week that you can join for just $5 a month. And our little disclaimer, none of the services offered by Solid Ground or its individual facilitators constitute psychotherapy, medical, or legal advice and should not be construed as such.
Awesome. And yes, please join us. We have a lot of time. We have a good time in those meetings. They're good discussions, and I think people get a lot out of it. I get a lot out of it. And still, we've been going on, a couple of years with the counterweight groups, and 1 year almost for Solid Ground. So it's really fun. And speaking of Solid Ground, this topic we're discussing today relates to something that we talked about really briefly at the end of our group last Thursday. Deborah, you were there, and I raised this up because I thought it was really interesting to see the sentiment expressed. Peter Boghossian said something about, on his Twitter, kind of I don't have the tweet in front of me. Do you have it, Deborah? It was sort of like now that it's safe to stand up to DEI and social justice ideology, people are standing up to it. Where were they when it was really risky and challenging? And I thought this was an interesting, it was interesting because it expressed so much. One thing he got criticized for, and I was critical of it as well, is this, that's not how you bring friends to the table. That's not how you, if you've been telling people, wake up, come over here and listen to us, and then they start to say, okay, I do hear you, I'm on your side, and you yell at them because they didn't get there soon enough, that's not necessarily a helpful thing. But then the other thing that he's expressing, it sounds like, is real frustration that with people who didn't help when it was challenging and he was sticking his neck out. And I can relate to both sides of that. I can relate to please, let's not push people away. And also, yes, it is really frustrating to be taking risks when people around you agree and don't say anything. But there's another piece of that, and it's the idea that now it's safe. Like that was another chunk of that clause. Now it's safe to do this. Now we're like, are we on the other side? Have we crested a wave? Have enough of the culture started to reject this kind of critical social justice thinking that we can say things like this? And I'm not sure about that, but Deborah, you had some thoughts, and I'm really interested.
I can't find that particular tweet, but I want to share there's a woman I follow on Twitter. I think she goes by MWA now. I think she was being multiracial whiteness advocate.
Okay.
And she's not been particularly a fan of woke things, but I'll read this series of tweets because she went to a party in Brooklyn, Park Slope, if you know the vibe, probably some Gen Xers and some millennials. And she was kind of surprised how people seem to be speaking a bit more freely, even though she's been making fun of all this woke stuff all along. I think it took her aback. So she said someone had tweeted, "Why is everyone so racist all of a sudden?" And she said, "It's happening among even people you least expect. I just left a Christmas party full of urban liberals and it was hemorrhaging like a geyser." And then someone said, like, actual racism or racism rebranded with modern definitions. And she said the second, but it still was just, God, it was so shocking to hear. Like someone uncorked a bottle of vintage grievances and they all came out at once. And then someone else said, I'm assuming from your tone, these aren't the type of liberals who have been engaging in cheap, liberal-friendly bigotry the whole time, but rather more sanguine and classy types. And she said, kind of. I'm talking about Park Slope progressive types, some Xers and early millennials in the crowd. It was shocking, to be honest. And someone said, can you give an example without naming names? She said it was a lot of stuff we'd find racist from 2012 to like the present. A few Gen Xers decided they were tired of pretending to like rap music. Others laughed. Others laughed about a book I'd read recently and brought up in conversation about privilege, called it well-intentioned but pathetic. People talked about crime in the starkest, clearest terms imaginable. My friend my age said he grew up not taking the subway because of what's happening now, and he named names. Everyone angry at Harvard, loud, clear pot shots taken at Claudine Gay, worse than anything I've seen on Twitter. And then someone said, this is just the daily classical heterodox liberal Twitter. Only thing missing is hand-wringing about trans women. And she said, I mean, look, I almost ruined a dinner last year because I accidentally used the word retarded offline. Things are shifting.
Oh, interesting. So how do you interpret all that? What do you think, if you were to describe the experience that this person is having in different terms, what would that be?
Well, I think one, in terms of, you think about her shock, I think we've been, I mean, despite not wanting to be, I've been so sensitized to like anything, you know, like, even though I wouldn't have never thought these things are at all. And so now, because I think our filters or hypersensitivities are so up, even the slightest transgress, whatever, just seems so surprising. And then just to have a whole party of people, imagine these people who have been acting so progressive and so woke like all along, and all of a sudden they're just going black, like they're just not having it. They just that's it, like it's been corked all this time.
So it's like the political correctness just came off.
Yeah. And it seemed like, I don't know who started it. I wasn't there. Like, I don't know if one person went or just everybody had just, it was up to here. And but knowing just that setting and like those people, right? Like it's kind of amusing to me to see that happen. And again, I don't know if it's a local circumstance or people are losing it, but I'm just seeing, I was saying earlier, I'm seeing more people on Twitter who are starting to look into what is going on with this DEI stuff. What is CRT? What is, you know,
people who are waking up to it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Again, like, what do I know? I have my little slice of Twitter. It's not the world, but I've been curious about that. You see people retweeting like Rufo or Glenn Lowry or whatever, and I don't think they maybe even knew who these people were that long ago. So it's very interesting.
Hello to Jen in the chat, and Ray and Paul McAuliffe and Later Holmes. Hello. Jen says Park Slope. Interesting. Is there hope after all? I don't know Park Slope, so maybe that's a
New York centric.
Okay.
Kind of hipster, you know, more hipster than thou kind of place.
What's interesting is like a kind of a reminder when you say you're seeing people who are kind of becoming aware of these things now. It's a reminder of what a bubble we exist in, and how we've all kind of, even though there's this internet and we're all connected to everything and it feels like everything's everywhere all at once, we still fall into bubbles and camps and cliques. And so the people who've been worried about this particular thing, that's the thing that I felt like I was trying to talk outside of that bubble when I made the first Antioch video. I was thinking of people like, I've said this before, but like my dad, who, you know, he would hear, oh, you're worried about racism and stuff. Well, that's good. You need to be worried about that. That's a really good thing. But he wouldn't have understood the way it was being taught now was different. There were just, and I think that there's probably a large group of people, anybody who was educated prior to what, 2010, Anybody who was through the higher education system prior to that probably has no idea the way that the shift has happened and how we're talking about these things now. And so it might be a lag time before they realize, no, they really are doing, it's a different thing. This isn't an exaggeration on the part of the people who are complaining about it.
I think some veils are, I don't know if it's veils being pierced, but like, for example, there's a very big, I haven't finished reading it, piece that James Bennett, who was the guy who allowed the Tom Cotton op-ed in the New York Times that was about, bring the National Guard in during the period in 2020 when there was so much unrest. And he just basically like excoriates the New York Times and just talks about how like they're just not even holding like journalistic standards and things like that. And if you look at New York Times comments, reader comments more and more lately, especially on things about DEI, you see a lot of the people in the comments are like, yeah, I've had it with this stuff too. And on the other hand, someone the other day told me that a friend of them said, oh, I think the New York Times is turning right wing.
Oh.
So you still have those people.
Yeah, what is right wing now? I mean, what is the divide? Has the polarization reached the center to where anything that crosses the midline is, what is that? What's your sense of things with regard to political polarization right now?
I think anything a hair off of left is right wing. A hair off of progressive, fairly progressive left is right wing.
What do you think, Jen?
I think that the left has been really skilled and very successful at branding anything that is off the left as not just right, but far right, and knowing that that's been associated with, of course, really negative things. And they've successfully shamed people, I think, in their own interests, so that you're terrified to deviate from leftist opinions at all, for fear of being branded far right and therefore an actual true racist. And yeah, I think they've done a great job at it, sadly.
It makes it harder for some people to make their points. Like Matt Taibbi's been coming under fire, like, oh, now he's right wing. And so he might have an argument, but he spends half of his time saying, I'm not right wing. And this is all the ways how. And then and that it's harder for him to have any space to actually make the case about whatever he was talking about in the first place. Like he accepts their framing. I think it's hard to not accept their framing, but I can see people spending a lot of time trying to get out from under the framing.
I don't think you can, and I kind of do think it's a waste of time, because they're going to do whatever they want to do and whatever's most expedient. And Jordan Peterson has repeatedly explained that he considers himself to be a classic British liberal, and people will still call him far right. And I think in part they do it so that he will get that reputation, and then people won't bother to listen to him, and they won't be influenced by his ideas. I think it's a way of shutting down people even exploring something that doesn't meet with the approval of what is now essentially the establishment.
And what an interesting thing that could be used to dismiss someone so completely. Like I can remember one person that I had a recorded conversation with on this channel. And afterwards, there were several comments about how she felt like she had to give her liberal cred before she could go into her criticisms. Like she really had to, she felt like she had to lay out, no, I'm really a Democrat. No, I'm really this, I'm really that. And then she could give her spiel or the thing that she was concerned about. And it was like this feeling like that it wouldn't be taken seriously. It would be branded as right wing and then dismissed. And the people who are watching this channel, it's an interesting mix. There tend to be a lot of people who will criticize anything that seems vaguely left or woke. And I don't know if they come from more of a Republican or right wing perspective. I don't know. It's strange bedfellows in this when you're rejecting woke. I have kind of come to the place where I'm rejecting left and right. I don't have any time for any of that polarization in my life anymore. And I don't care for either party. I'm probably at this point, if I'm just being really honest, less inclined to vote Democrat than anything, but we'll see in time. I mean, I'm not going to give my liberal cred here by giving you my track record, although I could, political history. But yeah, it's interesting that you would have, is there such a large group of people, and who are they that wouldn't hear you if you were branded right wing? Who would not be able to hear that? Would it just be the far left woke crowd, or would it
No,
be all the Democrats still?
I think it would be the vast majority of Democrats and people who are just basically normies, sort of your colleagues, who your people at work in the corporation who are just, not particularly politically aware, but they've adopted what they think are the views that are a continuation of the Civil Rights Act, but actually aren't, who don't read widely, but they they want to do the right thing, and they assume that whatever the Democrats are saying must be the right thing. They've put years of trust in them. I did myself, and so I think, yeah, I think they automatically, if they hear right wing, there's a whole host of assumptions that go along with that, and it shuts down exploration.
And so at that point, it does make sense to give one's so-called liberal cred in order to speak to those people. If you're trying to say, hey, would you listen to this? I really do have some concerns. Then you have to first establish, I'm like you in these ways, and I have this history that you could relate to in these ways. And so it's not a, that's the thing, is it worth it? Do we accept that paradigm, or do we reject that paradigm and not worry about Ray in the chat says ad hominem is a primary tactic. Label someone bad, and then no one need listen to that bad person. And so, and I can remember, and I don't know if I've said this before on this channel. I said this to Benjamin recently, and he thought he kind of made fun of me for it, and I deserve to be made fun of for it because it's really awful. But at a dinner party in Seattle I guess it would have been probably like 2014, 2015. I can remember making this joke that, what did I say? Republicans think Democrats have bad ideas, but Democrats think Republicans are bad people, because they are. That was what I said. That's how I felt. I still felt like I was coming off of the Bush 2 years and the W years. And when I felt very against that war and what we were doing, and the manipulations with the WMDs and the Patriot Act and all this stuff. And that was my political coming of age. So it was like this, wow, these people are really horribly corrupt. Halliburton and Rumsfeld and Cheney and all these guys just seem like villains to me. And it was like, that's what Republicans are. They're bad people. And I had allowed myself to really adopt that polarized paradigm to the point where I could sit there and make that joke at a dinner party and feel so smug and self-righteous and feel like everybody around me were good people, so they were going to agree with me, like, what a tool. But I know I felt that way.
Oh no, I was totally like that too. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I just had invested my faith so much, in the Democrats, that I felt that, well, they're always going to represent what is correct and true. And so therefore I can just read things that are representing their line of thinking, and I can trust that they have fully informed me about the issue. And it's quite disorienting when you find out that that's not actually the case.
I know. I remember when I lived in Boulder, Colorado, which is fairly liberal, and we had like a weekly, like the Boulder Weekly. And when it was time to vote, at least anything local, I kind of knew what I might do in the, just party ticket, higher levels. I would just read their recommendations for what to vote for, and I would just do what they said. But I had no idea there was another. I mean, I probably knew there was another point of view, but I didn't even bother to go find it. I just go, what does the Boulder Weekly say?
Mm. Yeah.
So,
What was your turning point?
for me,
Yeah.
um,
What made you open up to other
well, I
thoughts and
think with
other
Braver
ideas?
Angels in particular, I mean, once I started seeing like a lot of polarization, and also I was just doing personal practices that were internal, like growth practices, which were around getting as many perspectives as possible that you can on things, and also not doing shadow projection. So I had like an inner path, psychological, spiritual path that at a certain point wasn't going to allow me to keep doing that. And then when I saw how people were getting so divided, and I heard like, I was probably disturbed in like 2016, 2017, but then um, by 2018, then I was starting to wonder. I still, even for 2020, like I still ardently campaign for a Democratic candidate. I don't know if I was still vilifying Republicans the same way, but I was definitely for my side, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like once 2020 hit, then I started like really questioning everything and reading a lot more things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Did you have a sense of a specific turning point, Jennifer? Elliot has an idea.
God. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a couple things. And one of them was, I'm going to see if I can shut him up.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
he stopped.
Oh.
No, I am going to try to shut him up.
Okay, that's fine.
So one of, all right, that's enough. That's enough. Away from the window. Okay. Sorry about that. My dog has to weigh in on everything.
He's opinionated.
Actually, there were a few things that happened where I started to question the Democrats. I did not like how Obama was handling things after Islamic based terrorist attacks. He was saying things that I thought were really intellectually dishonest. I can't remember which terrorist attack it was. It might have been the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris. And he said, this attack has less to do with Islam than any other religion, which I thought was astoundingly distorted and intellectually dishonest. It wasn't the Buddhists and it wasn't the Quakers. Let's just say that. So I was pretty disgusted and started reading other views. I also really disagreed with the Democratic response to just the way people were talking about anybody who had any concerns whatsoever about the massive waves of illegal immigration into Europe as well as the US. And the Washington Post wrote a really nasty hit piece on Jordan Peterson. I'd never heard of him before. And I was like, who is this guy? And I looked him up and started watching his videos and found out that he'd been really misrepresented by the Washington Post as some kind of far right lunatic. And I thought he was really brilliant and very measured in his opinions. But I have to say that I did feel like, oh, should I be listening to this guy? Should I be reading him? Is he somehow, dangerous? Because I think people, I mean, it makes sense to be afraid of a true white supremacist, and not that I thought that he was that, but to me, just anything that might be far right, I thought, oh God, that it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So if somebody said, oh, that's far right, I wouldn't listen to those person's opinions. I'd assume that they were some dangerous, racist, misogynistic maniac. But I learned that a lot of things have been misrepresented over the years. And I started checking out other sources and thinking more for myself.
It's interesting what you say about Jordan Peterson and the way that he was painted. I began my graduate program in 2019, and I had just learned of him maybe a year before that. I don't know exactly. 2017, 2018, I started to kind of pay attention to him, and I really found him very inspirational and got a lot out of the work that he was doing. And here he is. He's a psychology professor. And I was in an applied psychology program, and I was very aware that I couldn't say his name. I was very aware that I wouldn't be able to bring anything that he set up in that program. And that was kind of chilling for me. to know that I have been really motivated by some of the ideas being put out by a prominent psychology professor, and yet I can't talk about him here. That was interesting. And then Brandon Bergian says in the chat, for me, it was the Trump campaign. I watched the media just wildly lie and take out of context everything he said, to the point when it was so obviously not an accident. And I did observe that too. I didn't see that for a long time because I was only listening to one side of the media. And so I didn't like him. I had an attitude towards him that was negative because I thought he was really coarse and not an intellectual, upstanding person that you'd want representing your country. So I found him very coarse and vulgar. And so I was inclined to believe whatever the media was saying about him. And then when he gave his Mount Rushmore speech, it would have been it was during COVID. I don't remember when this was. But it was later on. It wasn't during his campaign. I listened to his speech and I actually liked it a lot. I actually found it to be a very good speech. And then I listened to the way it was being talked about in the media. It was as if they had listened to a different speech. And that was really stunning to me. That was really eye-opening for me.
Oh, yeah. I had that experience with that speech as well. And I thought, my gosh, we have just been lied to for so many years. And it made me realize you really have to check things out for yourself. You cannot just believe what you're told without some reflection and exploration, because I mean, some of these things are just absolute lies and distortions.
At the very least, like video clips or little bits of something. It's like, I'm like, okay, I want the full version of that, or I want the full transcript of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me what people allow to break through when they have a black and white opinion of something. How does that get chipped away, and how does light come through? And so you can start to I'm not saying see the other side and be convinced and flip and be polarized in the other direction, but allow nuance to exist within a black and white schema.
Yeah, and I don't know, in the case where we're seeing kind of a large effect right now is a lot of people who are Jewish who've been progressive sort of going, whoa, wait a minute. So they're feeling it quite viscerally and painfully, thinking, I mean, I just know some people that have been thinking, like, I've been supportive of BLM or these different causes, Jewish people really were there by the side of people during the civil rights movement. And then now what? Like, what were the oppressors? You're going to just let these things happen to these kids on campus and you actually don't care. You don't care. Women were raped. It doesn't matter, that sort of thing. And so that's one that has been a more rapid, I'd say, or shock induced one. There may be the people that have it more gradually, like something just doesn't add up. But I don't know. I don't know what the percentage breakdown is of shock or pain versus, that was weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the campus stuff right now is interesting. What's happening with people kind of realizing that's what you mean when you say decolonize. Oh, you really mean that. It's being taken quite, the awareness that it's quite literal for these people is, I think, shocking to a lot.
And I think it's just going to extremes. I was in another conversation with this yesterday. Like, it's really becoming blatant that if you're oppressed, the idea is if you're oppressed, no matter what behavior is acceptable. I mean, it's any form of antisocial or violent, whatever, like the number of people kind of giving that a pass as, of course, an oppressed person should be able to do that. It's shocking how much that seems to be taken on board. And then there's no like agreement in civil society of certain ways that people should be comporting themselves.
Yeah, if the content of your grievance is strong enough, then you get a pass on moral civil behavior.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how do we redirect that? How do people begin to redirect that or reestablish the value of civility?
I don't know if the unrest has to get bad enough. I don't know. People are like, wait a minute, I don't like what's going on. I don't know. Or, if people start realizing the problems with such black and white thinking, but I don't know, again, like how does any one person suddenly see they're doing that and stop doing it? Some of it's cultural, like if it's going on around you and people are suddenly into nuance, and that's cool.
Let's see, going to the chat. Jen in the chat from earlier on, she says, Park Slope peeps admitting to listening to Glenn Lowry is a big deal. Later Holmes says, loving Glenn and Tabia lays the evil of DEI right out. I don't know who Tabia is.
I think she said Tabia. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
Tabia Lee. Ray says Dr. Tabia Lee is inspiring. So that's somebody to check out. David Pellegrinelli says, nice. Hope this positive move towards objective reason is not just a blip, but is a change in direction that will gain momentum. Billy Ray.
Here.
Yeah. Billy Ray says, hi from Canada. And Dave Pellegrinelli says, right wing is anything other than woke. And
yeah, exactly. That's pretty much right.
Yeah. And he also says, I wonder how to address that resistance instead of I'm not sure this word, repeating or amplifying. Maybe that was repeating or amplifying the resistance, I guess.
Yeah.
And then later Holmes says Republicans were warmonger rubes. Dems had Jon Stewart, superior intellect and humor. So he's kind of describing what was at least definitely my attitude in the 2000s.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well.
In fact, there was even this idea, at least amongst people I knew, that probably Jon Stewart was the best place to go for the news, even over the regular news, if you wanted to be informed, even though it was a comedy show.
Oh, yeah. No, I know a lot of people that felt that way.
It was kind of interesting when that came out, that information was circulating for a little while. Like, wow, look at the younger generation. They're getting their news from a comedian. That was our generation, at least at the time. Miroir Jumeau says Tabia Lee's especially great because she's got a woke hairstyle.
Yep.
Oh, is that you know?
I think it's purple. She has colored hair.
Okay. And later Holmes says, could a therapist draft me a letter exempting me from DEI activities? It raises my blood pressure to unhealthy levels.
Oh, I want to say another thing about that I don't know what's happening with this, but someone on Twitter said that they were trying to look at the pages that Harvard has on DEI, like on its website, and it looks like a bunch of them are either down or like no one knows, are they scrapping them, or they, the pronouns page was like not there or something. And I don't know. I didn't go look myself, but I do imagine they're either cleaning things up or I don't know if they're really getting rid of them, but that was really amusing.
When I went last year, I guess it was around this time last year, I was doing a lot of trying to comb through all this stuff from Antioch because I just started this conflict process with them. And I was shocked at the stuff that they have on their website. That I thought, how is this okay? And how can they just blatantly put this up there? Like the white privilege backpack thing, like a university saying these really, I'm sorry, just really regressively, I was going to say retarded. I'm just going to go ahead and say it's really retarded stuff. It just seems so blatantly racist.
Don't you mean intellectually disabled, Leslie?
Maybe I
can.
Yeah, it's appropriate.
Make retarded great again. Murga. No, sorry. Terrible.
I've just looked up Tabia Lee and I see she's written an article for the New York Post and it's entitled, I was a DEI director. DEI drives campus anti-Semitism. Very nice. I'll read this later.
Yeah, I'll tell your story in brief, which is she was hired to Danza College, it's a community college, to come in and be in this DEI position. What's so interesting about her is she's been doing this whole world of DEI, but completely unaware of this CRT, or maybe she wasn't unaware of it, but she had just never seen any of this implemented or operationalized. So she comes in with more of a sense of, let's make sure people get along. Let's learn how to navigate conflict, which to me would be, that might be a good thing of having inclusion or whatever, like people are, different things. And she was blindsided, as far as I could tell, by basic woke approaches to race. And so she comes in, and she was also hired. Someone else internally had hoped to get that position and signaled to her very quickly that they were kind of pissed that she got it. And it was just very clear right away when she questioned things like, why is there no, there's all these different cultural months we celebrate. Why is there no Jewish thing on the calendar? Why have people been asking for years not to start the school year on Rosh Hashanah, and the school keeps doing it like on purpose? Why? And people just like shooting her down. Someone told her she was enacting white supremacy or something, and she's black. By the way, racialized as black, and she just couldn't even, and she finally discovered that Tema Oken, because she wanted to have an agenda in a meeting and to run a meeting.
And that's being really white, apparently.
Yeah, it's being very white.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Goal-oriented structure.
Yeah.
So anyway, she just kept trying. And I think it took her eventually to go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And
she stayed strong in that conviction and didn't allow herself to question herself the way that.
Yeah, she kept trying to, she would come in with her presentations she has a really good map of matrices of different theories of race, and the people who are the exponents of them, and the different models. And so she's done some interesting thought work around all of these things, and clearly doesn't think the CRT woke way is the way to go. But anyway, so I think I learned about, because FAIR took up her case, her legal case. So I knew of her from that. She's now doing stuff related to, I think, one of the organizations that's trying to make sure the curricula are being less radical, say around, I don't know if it's just ethnic studies, but she immediately got, she's got so much to offer. So but anyway, Glenn interviewed her. And so
I got to see this. That's great.
Yeah. Okay. It's really, it's kind of surprising. How could she not necessarily know, being in the diversity world, that this stuff was going on, and then just sincerely trying to just do something very healthy with people, and just getting all of this attack. You could just see how just blindsided
that was a wake-up call for her, realizing, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And it's two people in the chat, Mirwar Jumo and Ray, both said that she was accused of whitesplaining.
Oh,
what is whitesplaining? Can one of y'all whitesplain to me what that means?
Now?
Yeah.
Mansplaining, but a white person.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's
hilarious.
Very creepy.
Whitesplaining.
I had a group yesterday, and my sound wasn't working, and so I was facilitating in the chat, and at the end I said I was practicing being a cis straight white male in the meeting because I couldn't talk.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, your silence is violence, Deborah.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's interesting. There was something I was going to say. Oh yeah, Brandon Burgarian actually says you can't, because silence is violence. Yeah. There was something I was going to bring up about this, and it's slipping my mind. Jennifer, what do you think about any of this?
Well, my hope is that it does seem like more people are waking up to how the approach we have going on today that's informed by critical race theory, that this is not a continuation of the Civil Rights Act, that this is actually itself a form of racism, that it's profoundly cynical and harmful. And I do think more people are waking up. I'm not ready to go woohoo victory or anything by any stretch of the imagination, because I know, and I think it's important to recognize, people are still struggling in their workplaces and still facing harassment for criticism of this stuff. And so we are by no means out of the woods, but I do think more people are waking up. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that will continue.
Yeah.
And it does seem like, oh, go ahead.
No, Deborah, you go ahead.
it's tricky because I think some people can probably speak up more, and there's still some people in certain positions that probably are still going to be quite a target and will get, probably still get a lot. Like I'm looking Barry Weiss, like, she wrote this NDEI thing, and people just go at Barry Weiss anyway. Like she could sit there and they'll probably go at her. But they were even embroiling her in some sort of thing about somebody I think who was Palestinian who died in something, the IDF, and there was this whole like Barry Weiss the guy died because of Barry Weiss ordered a hit on, I don't know. It was just ridiculous, and so there's still a lot of like ridiculousness, I think, going on, and people that are prominent that are still probably targets for at least online abuse.
Absolutely.
Maybe if you're quietly like in your own company making a comment, amongst 3 people, that's a different story. But there's people I think that probably are way visible that could, still be getting a lot of flack.
Well, and it's still dominating the institutions, and that's what the real concern is, because there's always going to be people that have kind of revolutionary fringe ideas, and that's fine. People can think whatever they want. It's when the institutions adopt those ideas and then attempt to enforce them. And I think particularly concerning is the fact that all of this stuff is so much in the schools, and particularly that kids are getting indoctrinated with it still at a really young age, and it can't really be resolved until it's out of the institutions, because you're just indoctrinating your next wave of completely histrionic people screaming and yelling, with the purple hair. And I like purple hair, so nothing against that, but you know what I'm saying? Like just people that have just become completely unhinged and are screaming about microaggressions and trying to get people fired. The schools are creating the next wave of that. So
in the chat, this is something I think may be interesting to discuss. White Advocate says, and it needs to be called out explicitly as anti-white, not implicit mumbling about communism. And I don't really agree with that necessarily. I think that the anti-white stuff is just low-hanging fruit because it's such an easy category to attack, partly because it's not, as Miroir Jumeau says, a very meaningful category for a lot of people. I think that there's like this general who me, kind of response that doesn't lead to you watch the different, you can see the difference with this recent stuff happening with anti-Semitism. The category of Jewish is a meaningful category. And so if you call out people in that category or you start to attack them, you're going to get a meaningful response because it means something to them. But white is so diffuse. Especially in America, it's just I don't think that there's like this sense of white identity, and they've been trying to create that and make it into a boogeyman. But I think that the point is division, not specifically anti-whiteness. But what do you guys think?
I think it's both.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's both. I absolutely think they're trying to divide us. And I think instead of using class, they're trying to do it by race. And I do think the aim is to undermine, capitalism, democracy. I think it's basically like a form of neo-Marxism that instead of using class, they're using race. So I do think it is that. However, I know some people object to the term anti-white in part because it was quickly adopted by people who actually were very far right. But I like to call things what they are, and I don't really like to play language games. And I think it is anti-white. And there were so many terrible things in my workplace that were just absolutely denigrating white people and speaking about white people in a way that they wouldn't dare speak about anybody else. And yeah, I don't wake up in the morning and pop out of bed like a Pop-Tart. I'm white. Like my identity revolves around that. But the reality is I am white. I am indeed white. And just historically, I think aiming hatred at a particular group of people has never ended well. And so I think just like, you know, horrible anti-Jewish, anti-statements and activities should be called out as anti-Semitism, I think that these terrible things that they're saying about white people should be called out as anti-white. That's my feeling on it, even though that idea has sometimes been misused by people. I still think, I just think it is what it is, and it is anti-white. If you're saying absolutely horrible things about a group of people on the basis of an immutable characteristic they can't do jack shit about, didn't choose to be white, I can't escape it. It's like you are guilty just by existing. I think it's really dangerous.
I think that's a great perspective, and I can't disagree with anything you're saying. I guess I just would say it seems like it's an attack on what are perceived norms, because you see it with the anti-cis heteronormative and whatever. So it's like an attack on all the things that are perceived norms. And in the Western world, in Europe and the US, in Canada, North America, you've got this white majority, right? So it's part of the norm. I feel like it just is who happens to be normative, not necessarily anti-white per se. I feel like that narrows the field too much, so you're not talking about what's really happening in the in the most descriptive way. But I see your point, and I agree with you. Clearly anti-whiteness is a part of this for sure.
Well, and white people are a majority now, with millions and millions of people flooding Europe. I don't know how many generations will they still be a majority. And part of the reason why people who are saying all these horrible things about white people can't really put us in concentration camps is because, unlike the Jews, who were about 1% of the population, we are the majority. But I don't know, 100 years from now, probably not. I mean, London is 15% people from Muslim countries who are Muslim. That drastically changes the culture. Both racially and, culturally. And so, I see it as dangerous, and I actually want it called out.
I think I sit in maybe the middle here. I'm thinking, because I think possibly the original intention was whiteness is basically the majority culture or whatever of people, but there are people that will deploy that against a person. So there's this, whiteness, we're not really talking about a person, but then they could turn around and go, but we're not hiring you because you're a white man, or like, or you must be such and such. So there may have been this more nebulous, whiteness is kind of more a set of Western cultural norms, but then suddenly it will be weaponized against a specific individual who happens to have that coloring.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And so it's like a lot of the woke things, they sort of like, oh, it's not really that, but then it like moves around, And
what?
Convenient.
I think, that's a really good point about how it's applied practically and how it impacts individuals. And I guess I'm trying to articulate this, but it feels like if we focus on what it's anti, so if it's anti straight, if it's anti-capitalism, if it's anti-white or whatever it is, then we're going to play whack-a-mole, because it's a process. It's just it's a process of reductive, anti-individualistic, tearing people apart, divisiveness. And so I think that's been my concern with any kind of reaction or response to it too, is that if you just turn around and employ the same process back, if you become anti-woke in order to combat the woke, but you're targeting the people in the same way that they've been targeting you, what are you solving? Are you not just perpetuating that same process and asking for it to just shift its target? And so I guess it is anti-white, but I don't necessarily I think that that's too small a definition, because I think anti-white is just what it's pointing at right now. One of the things it points at, but what it is, whatever it is a process of dehumanizing other individuals and not being loving, for one thing. I mean, I know that sounds really simplistic and kind of naive, but it's not loving. It's about division and hate and resentment instead of love and understanding of other people and respect for the other.
So yeah, it sounds like you want to tackle it like at the root mechanism, right? And there are these manifestations that are a bit of a problem, but you're like, if you kind of pay attention at that, yeah, like you said, it's going to move around. So let's kind of go to the root of how this is operating.
Yeah, I think so. But I do also think that it does make sense to call it what it is, Jennifer, like you're saying, label it what it is, talk about what's being done. And when people have had that kind of experience, just like what the social justice folks would tell you, is that you got to listen to somebody's lived experience and understand what it's like to be them. I think that goes every single direction. These people who are experiencing not getting hired for the job because they're white, it sucks. That's really difficult. That makes their lives more difficult for no reason, or just for retribution. So Paul McAuliffe says, did you folks catch Boston Mayor Wu's holiday party for non-whites? Do you know what that's about, Deborah?
Yeah. Do you know, Jen? Do you want to tell it?
So, sorry, this is hilarious. She sent an email for council members to attend a holiday party that is for non-white council members only. She didn't mean to send the email to any of the white council members. It was meant to surreptitiously be sent to only the non-white people. But she sent it to everybody accidentally. And of course, it caused a bit of a stir. And it's funny because she was sort of apologizing for it, but she wasn't apologizing that they're holding a dinner that excludes people by race. She's apologizing for accidentally having sent it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. That's so fucking hilarious. I'm like, and then she says basically something like, well, but they're having a holiday party for everybody. So we look forward to seeing everybody there. That's when we'll deal with y'all white people. So the holiday party for everyone. Can you imagine if somebody sent an email out inviting only white people, only white council members? We need our own little holiday party. I just have to laugh because I just find it absolutely insane.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and her husband is white, and I just felt
oh my gosh.
She's Asian American. I just wondered how he's treated.
Well, maybe he can maybe he can eat his dinner out of a dog bowl or something while she sits at a table,
The white section.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, I think that's just crazy. I think it's so nutty that that this is being endorsed by anybody. And what's the repercussion for someone who's an elected official doing that kind of thing? I mean, promoting racial segregation. Is it an official party for elected officials or for their cabinet members?
Taxpayer money, presumably.
Taxpayer money. Oh my gosh. So what's the repercussion for that? That's just, is there one, or is it just, oh, well, she targeted the group that we're okay targeting. So yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something I was excited about listening to today. Lee Jussum, he's done some research around anti-woke things. And so he's working on some research. We can say we think DEI is not good or it's causing problems, but they're actually trying to test that by like introducing people, like the test subject, to like, I don't know, some Kendi-esque or D'Angelo-esque like statements, and then giving some sort of quiz afterwards, versus people that read about like an Iowa cornfield or something. I think that was the example. And so it'll be interesting to see. I don't know how well designed this is, but if we could actually see that after being exposed to some of these concepts, that people, I don't know how they'd show it. I don't know whether they'd give them things that would show in some intolerance, or if they'd give them some things that show negative attitudes towards groups. I'm not sure what they're going to test on, but to have someone like kind of finally, purposefully exposing people to some of these ideological approaches that we think aren't a good idea, and then actually see how that does affect people, and be able to prove something potentially with that. I think that's going to be really interesting findings.
Let's see. Mirwaj Jumo says, does the implementation of DEI, affinity groups in workplaces, etc., entail making lists of emails according to race, etc., so that you can easily tick a box to send to BIPOC or non-men, etc. only? Well, it certainly seems like it would. Like, you have to have your BIPOC email list and your white people email list. I mean,
that makes me sad, like
well, and then they have the like white identifying or BIPOC identifying, so that you can opt into whatever race you want to opt into. How do you even identify someone else's race?
Well, that's another thing.
So mixed up. We're so
I
blended, especially people
know.
families have been in the US for a long time. How many different races does even a very white looking person have oftentimes?
I just think that's such a kind of blunt and crude instrument for sorting people. I mean, why don't we just have a holiday party for blondes and a holiday party for brunettes? I mean, come on.
Can I be blonde identifying if I was a blonde as a kid?
I, as a blonde, will get to decide if you're legitimate.
Blonde lives matter, Jennifer.
Hey, and nothing is more friggin' culturally appropriated than blonde hair. Natural blondes were 2% of the population. So I'm a minority, technically. I just want to state that.
Sounds like you have been experiencing some marginalization.
I've been totally marginalized.
But you have more fun, right?
I do.
Well, is it privilege or marginalization at this point? You have blonde privilege. Oh my goodness. Well, what an interesting conversation. I feel like this is Ray says, I had to make such a list for my local union. Ooh, interesting.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we better wrap up because it's that time. And I never say this, but if people are watching this and enjoying it, please do subscribe to the channel and give it a like. And one of my New Year's resolutions is going to be to upload these episodes more quickly to Spotify, so that I'm on with that. Right now, I've been terrible about it, and I'll do like 2 or 3 of them all at once when I remember that I haven't done it. And so I'm going to try to do that as I do them, so that they can be more timely. So if you're enjoying it, please hang out with us, put us in the subscribe list or whatever. I never say that. It's such a pretentious podcastery thing to say. What, Deborah? It's funny because I think I was like talking over you and blocking your mic, so it's just like kind of a pantomime of all right, well, have a lovely week, everybody. Thanks for joining us in the chat, and it was really great to see you two today.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun.